Welcome back. Another week, another episode of the Web3 Insights podcast series. 2025 is well underway, and again, bringing you the latest innovation shaping the decentralized future. I'm your host, Aaron Hayhurst. Today, I'm absolutely thrilled to be joined by Yannick Myson, who is the founder and CEO of Swarm Network. Swarm Network is tackling some of the biggest challenges of our time: misinformation, centralized data control, and the lack of real-time verification by pioneering a framework for decentralized, purpose-driven AI swarms. With their groundbreaking Truth Protocol and the roll-up News prototype, Swarm is reimagining how decentralized AI agents can collaborate to anchor trust and transparency on chain. Let's dive into it and explore how Swarm is shaping the future of multi-agent AI collaboration. Yannick, absolute pleasure to have you on.
Thank you, man. Appreciate your time and thank you for having me on.
No. You're welcome. Yannick, could you start by sharing a bit about your journey and how you came to found Swarm Network? What motivated you to tackle issues like misinformation and centralized data control?
Yeah. So previously I was with another project that was building AI agents specifically, and we eventually ended up designing a solution for gaming, which was basically like these AI agents in virtual environments. And this was really interesting, and we learned a lot through that. But I felt like that was not really, like aligned with what it could potentially do for the world, right? Like you see a lot of these
Sure.
agents, they're essentially being used for entertainment, and that's all right, right? Like there's obviously a lot of maybe like happiness that can generate. So eventually we started to dive deeper into let's say, the true application and the true utilities. That's when I first started really toying around with the concept of an agent network. And then I architected a initial version of that network, got a lot of experience, but eventually interest kind of like misaligned. I wanted to go one direction. The team wanted to go a different direction. And that's where I decided that it was time for me to actually just do it by myself, right? Like I had a large team around me of very talented people that were willing to follow me. And I just said, you know what? Let's just go for it, right? And through my personal experience with a lot of the mis and disinformation around certain topics, especially during kind of like the COVID pandemic, we don't have to get into details, but I just saw that there were a lot of different agendas that were being pushed without, like for example, some of the studies that were done, they were not really thoroughly peer reviewed, or there was just a lot of data that was just didn't make sense, and nobody stood up to that, and nobody was able to go and verify that because everything was happening so fast, and there's a lot of these kinds of situations that were happening. And then we decided that it would be nice if we could build a solution to tackle like not just this kind of problem, but in general, you have a lot of arbitrary data online. The majority of the internet is arbitrary data. And now with Elon Musk also pushing the citizens journalism agenda, which actually is very reminiscent of like what the QAnon brutes have been shouting. You are the news now, you are the media now. But
Yeah.
like there's so much information out there, and it's increasingly, speeding up. The velocity of information increases. Everybody thinks they can say whatever they want, and there's nobody fact checking it. If you think
Yeah.
about it, there's like 3.2 billion users on Facebook. Like, how is a company like that going to, make sure that you as a user can live in a safe environment where you understand where the information is coming from? And yeah, Swarms can help with that.
Yeah, no, for sure. I love your motivation as well around how it started as well. That's something that I personally live by. When you've got an idea or a thought process of how something should be done, just do it. That's one
Yeah,
of my sort of processes, is like just effing do it, is JFD.
yeah,
take that risk, make that jump. And, if you believe in something enough and how something should work and the way it should be done, then just effing do it. And, it's great to see that you've done that. Swarm obviously focuses on addressing misinformation, centralized systems, and the lack of trust in markets and media, as you were saying there. Could you explain these challenges in more detail and why they're so critical today?
Yeah. Let's start with just diving a little bit deeper in the mis and disinformation. I think that we live in a world where nowadays, like, being grounded in truth is almost like an optional, right? Like, we humans, we are living essentially by two systems, and there's a lot of debate about this, and I might get shut down for what I'm gonna say right now, but you have a subjective reality and you have an objective reality. And good outcomes usually orchestrate when you're more grounded in a objective reality, when you can really look around you and see what the facts are, and you can use the facts that are presented to you that you are able to observe to align your decision making and get better outcomes, right? And the beauty of the thing is that we're always optimizing for the whole, right? For the entirety of humanity or the entirety of the nation or maybe your team at work or whatever, right? It's not just you individually. So I believe that truth and trust in systems, especially, let's say like governments and financial institutions such as banks and these kinds of things, they're really important, but it seems like we're moving away from that because of the danger of the technology, or that the danger that the technologies that we're using every day is posing, right? So you got AI, for example, right? Let's look at those deep fakes and let's look at how easy it is now to just create like an army of bots and go and do like a crazy psyop and interfere with global elections and this kind of stuff. And I can tell you that 98 or maybe 99% of the users of the internet are completely oblivious to this. And there's no easy way for you to now at all go and fact check something. You Google something, but Google search results are often manipulated if it's about really touchy subjects, Like the internet is so fast, and still sometimes you Google something which is being talked on social media and then there's no search results, which is really extreme cases. And sometimes, there's just results which doesn't make sense. You look at the presidential election just now, whenever you Google Trump, like the first and the second page would just be negative, right? And obviously, I don't think that really reflected the actual sentiment of people, because he's not the bloody president, right? So there's a lot of things going on that we as users of these large, service providers, tech like Google, Facebook, and even beyond that, just, between you and me, there can be situations where I would just like to understand, what kind of like subjective or objective facts you're bringing to the table and what you're using to try and persuade me to do a certain thing. And there's no easy solution for that at the moment, right? And then another thing is that there's a huge opportunity for this arbitrary data to become valuable on a market level as well. So I understand that sometimes when I talk to fellow people in the Web3 space and I talk about information and arbitrary data on chain, they're like, oh, like nobody's gonna pump that, right? And that's really interesting, because actually one of the things that I find very intriguing is that actually you can use this data to do things which are related to certain types of markets. For example, prediction markets, right? Right now, if you want to conclude a prediction market, you need to rely on a protocol that allows you to bring arbitrary data on chain. And usually those protocols are designed in a very optimistic and naive way. It says that, okay, we have a network that we trust, which is built up out of individuals that operate on this network, that potentially have stake in this network, and they can provide information, but we will always assume that that information is true. If it's not true, then somebody within a network should say it's not true, and then we can go into a process of verification. But obviously, this is a very flawed mechanism, because actually the opposite is true in reality. Maybe we should always assume that something might not be 100% true. And usually it's really hard to identify if something is truly 100% true. We have actually a score that there's like a score, and for something to be like 1, that's very extraordinary because there are so many subsets of different variables or subclaims hidden within the original claim that could be, like maybe even like contradicting each other.
Yeah.
So yeah, but what you can do then with such a system, so with our system, what you can do is you can bring this data on chain real time and verify it to a certain extent in real time. And then you can create markets out of this, right? So now if we want to create a smart contract that is triggered whenever the price of a certain commodity, which is like maybe like a really niche commodity that is not really tracked, but just only through a certain market participants, and there's only certain data streams that we can use. But we want to, purchase that commodity on chain. Then there's no way for us to do that. But if we use our system, then you can actually do these kinds of things. And for example, another cool thing that we're working on is we're using a swarm to allow people to create instant prediction markets on Twitter based off topics that they're discussing in real time that can be
Nice.
concluded like even like minutes or 10 minutes or hours or years later. It just depends on the context of the conversation. And it's like, because it's in real time and because you can trigger the system whenever you want, and because it's just basically run by AI agents, right? So like imagine 1,000 agents just working for you nonstop. They don't need sleep. They don't need food. They don't get depressed. They don't care
Yeah.
about, the way you speak to them. They just work, right? So
Yeah.
it's very scalable.
Yeah. That sounds awesome. It's definitely a key thing, across various markets and media at the moment. And there is a huge lack of trust in anything that you read. And so anything that can combat that, I think, in my opinion, I could see doing really well. Swarm's vision is, centers on creating multi-agent collaboration framework. Can you explain what this means to the audience and how decentralized AI agents can work together purposefully?
So at the core of what we've built now, which is basically a huge case study, right? So you got the Truth Protocol and this roll-up news and this AI agent swarm that is basically powering that whole application. Like almost all of what you interact with is basically propagated and generated through this AI agent layer, which is a middleware layer. But that's just one use case. So we realized really early on, actually my CTO, he realized really early on that it was kind of tricky to really spin up a good swarm. Like up until just very recently, it was relatively hard to manage. There were not really a lot of good frameworks out there to just spin these things up and like literally have them run an application on your behalf because it was unpredictable. A lot of agents could only really function very well with one or two tools. The environment had to be secured and so on and so on. So we actually have been working on such a solution for a really long time, a couple of years. And we also realized that like we're just building one use case, but our audience and our users and whoever wants to build a swarm could use this framework to build something which is adjacent to what we're building, or even completely like the opposite. So the core of it is, okay, we have this framework that works really well. You can orchestrate a team of agents that function in a certain manner. They can communicate with each other. They operate in a trusted environment. So the variables that they operate on are visible and verified. That's one thing that's really important, which is related to kind of like this black box theory that we have around AI. It's like, okay, you give information to, let's say, ChatGPT. First of all, you
Yeah.
don't know where that information goes. You don't know if it's stored. Probably it is. And then also, you don't really know what's happening. Like you get an answer, but there's no transparency in the process. And now that these agents are becoming much more kind of like rational in a way where they have like multiple steps to come to, really an agentic flow that's like there's multiple steps of reasoning. There's multiple tools that these agents can call, even ChatGPT now, like this O1 Pro mode. Sometimes you need to wait 3 minutes because actually in the
Yeah.
back it's secretly spinning up instances of different agents that help it reason. But you don't know. You just get an answer, right? But what is it? How do you know if it's biased? How do you know if the information is, like even coming from, maybe like a trusted party or whatever. So to bring that on the blockchain is important because it becomes transparent. right? We
Yeah.
can now start to kind of like see like, okay, well, there's a custom, there's kind of like an identifier for that changes according to the variables that change. So whenever something changes, we know something changed and we can actually check what changed, right? So it's really interesting because this way you can not just create transparency and kind of like make AI more explainable and make these swarms and their processes more explainable to the regular human. It also allows for interesting stuff like governance, for example, like decentralized governance and so on. I think that's one thing which is really exciting to me is that, okay, now we can co-own a swarm, right? Like maybe we need to pay for APIs, maybe we need to, we need to invest a little bit of money. Let's build a swarm together, co-own it, and then launch an asset for it. If it performs really well, other people can buy in, they can join the governance process, they can join the development of this thing, and you can really push it like beyond what Web 2 really offers you, right? Because in Web 2 you have to go down the route where you say like, okay, I built this agent, now I need to find applications for it and people that actually want to buy it, and it becomes really hard to scale, right? But you also know how businesses are built. Like sometimes it just takes some capital, sometimes it takes a little bit of time, sometimes it takes much more manpower than just, like let's say like a bedroom or backyard startup, right? Like sometimes these great ideas, they just don't simply manifest themselves right off the bat. So yeah, like that framework of ownership, decentralized ownership around these things also really excites me.
Sure. When you mention like a swarm of agents, is there like a specific number of agents in this swarm that are operating at any given time?
For our swarm, for the current swarm that we're running to power the roll-up news, it's around like 100, and they're situated in different teams. And then there's also a consensus swarm, which is running on different models, has different sources of information to be able to verify or to check certain types of information that the other swarm is propagating. And then
Yeah.
if that 2/3 of that network finds consensus, then it's actually kind of like verified, if you will, to a
Nice.
certain extent, because there's a score too, and there's also reputation. So sometimes there might be bad actors voluntarily or involuntarily, and those bad actors can be punished as well. So, but you could scale that up, right?
Hmm.
Like you could make a process so complicated and so intense that it might require, let's say, like 1,000 or like a hundred
Yeah.
thousand agents. But I do think that there's currently like a limit to, I almost want to say like there's a limit to our imagination of what we can do
Hmm.
really,
Yeah.
as humans. It's like, okay, like how many people in the world can manage a company with more than 2,000 people, right? If you
Hmm.
have that skill, then probably you can apply that to build like a really great swarm, right? Because like it's all about SOPs, processes, and systems. You can build that into code. So yeah, practically you could make it really big. And then for some applications, let's say like for the truth protocol itself, the more the merrier. The more owners join the network and add more agents and add more swarms, the more varied and the more accessible, like how easier it becomes to be able to access different types of data, right? Because you might build a swarm to verify a certain part of the internet. I'll build another one, like our neighbors build another one, and that just kind of like branches out and spills out. And because
Yeah.
it's connected to a central point, right? So everything flows through the protocol, that kind of becomes like almost like the database in a sense, right? So in that sense, the more the merrier because there's so much data out there. But for other use cases, probably you can, I guess like swarms of like 5, 10, 20 would be really good at certain things.
Yeah. Yeah, no, nice. Okay, interesting. Looking at the Truth Protocol, then, this is described as a large scale use case for real time verified on chain data. Could you just briefly walk us through how it works and, its potential impact on markets, media, and governance as well?
Yeah, sure. In essence, it's really simple. In essence, it's actually similar to how you yourself would verify something if you would have the time to go and figure something out online, right? So let's say So we can use rollup news as an example because that's the first application that is really built and powered on top of this protocol. So
Yeah.
if you find a thread on X that you find questionable, or maybe you just want to know whether, all of the information presented to you is factual, or if there's something missing even, right? So you could then tag rollup lower dash news and write rollup in your comment. That's a trigger. There's an entry point into the protocol and into the swarm that powers information rollups for rollup news. What happens? That piece of content is then pushed to the swarm. The first part of the process is about propagating that thread and turning it into claims. So this user says XYZ, ABCD, EFG, and so on and so on. And those can be relatively general. And then there's another team that then takes all of those claims and cuts them and turns them into the smallest unit of a verifiable claim. So sometimes we might have a claim, let's say somebody says that this cup contains water, right? But you
Yeah.
could have smaller units of verifiability around that event, right? So where's the cup? Who's holding the cup? Where does the water come from? Right? And obviously, depending on the context, some things might be completely irrelevant, right? So the swarm, that team that's responsible for that next step, which we call atomic claims, is basically just assessing the context of the whole thing, the context of the claim, and then seeing if there might be something else that we want to try and verify regarding that specific claim. Then it's sent off to the next batch of workers. Those workers are going to identify the capabilities of all of the research teams that have access to different data points and different existing registries of fact-checked information. Some have access to X archive, so they can pull up research papers and this kind of stuff. So there's a different purpose for each research swarm. And then there's this operator layer in between that says, hey, you guys go and check out information that's related to this. You guys go and check out information that's related to this. You guys go and check out information related to this. And then information is pulled from all corners of wherever it comes from, the internet or private databases. It doesn't really matter. And that's then presented to the council. That council then assesses individually and independently whether that information can be used to verify certain claims and gives a score. Basically it's kind of like a sentiment analysis on the accuracy of the information and the trustworthiness of the sources and the credibility, and whether that source has, like different versions with different information and so on. So there's a deeper process that goes on, but eventually a score is given, and then a claim is either falsified, verified, or remains unsubstantiated. And the cool thing is, when it remains unsubstantiated, the next time you roll up something else and another inference is run and another search is done on a similar claim, there's a bi-association, there's association through a tagging system. And then we might uncover a piece of information that can, by chance, substantiate or unsubstantiate something that was processed previously. So it's like a continuous growing, almost like an organism of information.
Yeah.
And there's one important thing that I want to mention is that I really believe in humans being the drivers, humans being the operators of these things. So I never intend to take the human nuance and the human context out of the mix. So for me, it's very important that we always have an entry point for humans. So hence we have like these rollups that are returned to you as a read only right now. But on the next version, you can actually go in, you can click any claim or any sentence or anything that's written there, and you can start to provide context and provide information, because we cannot
Awesome.
assume that, the AI is always going to be right? We need to train, and we need to show, and we need to teach these things on, like how to be more human.
Yeah, I don't know. Human element is a real differentiator for sure. Interesting. Okay, great. So looking, obviously, there's a lot of use cases there. from the sounds of it, as you were mentioning around sort of social media moderation to market transparency, governance, fact checking. There's the use case is obviously quite vast. What applications in particular are you most excited about, and why?
Yeah. So I think the first one is obviously like the misinformation, disinformation, bringing information and claims on chain.
Yeah,
And that's the first step to kind of like my master plan for this next generation of dApps. And then building really exciting prediction markets on this, which is another important thing for me because I think these prediction markets. So I got the chance to speak with Vitalik a few times when we were in Susano in Georgia, and we were talking about this idea where you could use prediction markets to kind of like serve as a additional layer for this what you call citizens journalism, right? Community notes, for example, where if we highly disagree on something and this fact-checking process is going on, a market can actually unearth and bring more information to the table much faster, right? Like usually you will see before some big reports or earnings reports for larger corporations, you can see movement in the stock price. That means that, like the network understands something which has not been public yet. So there's this like very rapid feedback loop that can happen when we use prediction markets. And then there's also the value of truth that is generated. Because now it's practically there's no value for information because anybody can post it anywhere at any time without any cost, right? But now if we start to build markets around these things, poly markets did very well in that, but it's not dynamic enough in my opinion. We need to bring this thing to like social medias and into our conversations and so on. So that's another one which I'm really excited about. And then finally, what I'm most excited about is actually what other people will build on the framework. Because we have like a private alpha group, and I've been asking people, it's like, we're doing this agent license sale, which gives you access to the functions and the platform where you can build the swarms. And I've just been asking people, it's like, what would you build? And it's funny, man. Like the
that's awesome.
answers are so different. It's like there was like not even one single person that said exactly the same thing as the other. It's always like, very almost like private. Like people have like their kind of like ideas of how they want to improve the world and really interesting ideas too. So yeah, I'm exciting to see what the skill will bring. Probably there's gonna be like few of these swarms that we'll end up investing in. We have a community grant and a developers grant as well. So if there's people out there that have really crazy ideas for the betterment of our society or whatever it might be, optimizing for the whole, as I said, yeah, we're open to hear your ideas and potentially invest in you too.
Yeah, that's so cool. I love that. The best ideas win. Because everyone has different ideas as well on how potentially things should be done or validated. And I can imagine sort of as you're scrolling through a lot of these different ideas, you're like, oh my God, why didn't I think of that?
Yeah, man. Yes, yes, it's true. It's true. Like this other guy, he was like, you know what I would do? I would create like a Chrome plugin. And I would have that plugin to be there all the time when I'm scrolling the internet.
Yeah,
And it's like I can just smash the button
at
and
the
just
click of a
like
button.
boom and like take like a screenshot of the page I'm looking at or whatever information wherever at any time, like independently of the platform and just send it to my swarm. And I want to be able
Yeah,
to like tweak that swarm. Like, wow, that's so creative. And then other
because
people they're like,
so many people would use that as well
yeah,
to validate stuff. Even then, I was just thinking, awesome. Like I would definitely use that
yeah,
to verify stuff for sure.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think it's very interesting, man. What would you build?
Put me on the spot here. I don't know. Like, I'm going to go with that idea because you've said it. And, like, in my head, instantly, when you mentioned about that idea, like, I would love to have that type of tool where at the click of a button on Google Chrome, whenever I'm searching or I'm reading something, I can quickly try to verify how legitimate the content or whatever it is that I'm reading, because there is so much that you see, and I think about it all the time. Like even sometimes when I'm on X and you're reading stuff, or even in the general media, and you're looking at stuff and you're like, how true is a lot of this? Especially like, because I'm massively into football, like even something like I'm watching something or reading something about, this transfer or that transfer, and it's like, how true is that? Like, where's that information come from?
Yeah,
Or, you just have no clue. You just sort of take it on face value, and you're like, well, we'll see at some point.
yeah. And you know what's scary if you think about it? It's like probably you have like maybe like your favorite podcaster, right? For me, it would
Me.
be like Joe Rogan.
I thought you were
Yes,
going to say for you, it'd be me.
like besides Aaron, I listen to a lot of Joe Rogan, and there's this human bias where we automatically attribute credibility to people in even in like if we like them, but even in areas where they
Yeah,
don't really have expertise in. And you see this a lot. So, sometimes I'm listening to Joe Rogan and then I'll hear him talk about something which obviously he doesn't have any knowledge in. He's just dabbling with ideas and riffing with some the person who might not even be that credible either. Sometimes he has skeptical people on. Not skeptical, how to say that. Anyways, people that are kind of like out there.
hmm,
And then, like I catch myself. I'm like at a dinner party and I'm saying something as if it was a fact. And I'm like, wait, where the fuck did I get this from? Wait, I got this from
mm,
Joe Rogan. I need to like
yeah,
check myself right here. Like this is
yeah,
like probably like a piece of shit. And then, like sometimes, like go online and you check something and you're like, damn. It's like I took this for a fact because I heard somebody that I like say it. And that's
yeah,
how we humans work. And that's the danger of it. That's really the danger of it. It's like, yes, citizens journalism is great in theory, but in practice, there's just so many predatorial people out there that are just trying to push their own agendas. Like that's why things like Jonestown can happen, where 38 people commit
yeah.
suicide together just because they listen to one guy. And
Hmm.
that's happening on the internet too.
Yeah, absolutely. Are there any particular challenges that you see in implementing decentralized AI agents at scale? And are there any sort of plans, or do you have any sort of ideas of how you would overcome them so that, you get that adoption and success in the long run?
Yeah, I think people have to step away from the idea that AI can truly be fully decentralized because I think that that's just I don't see a way that that's gonna be really possible. It's like how are you gonna run or it's like they're talking about this like training of models, running of models on the blockchain entirely, which I don't think is it's not necessary and not possible. What we need to care about is like how can we verify and how can we have this essentially like protocol where we set the cultural values and standards of how we deem these systems are supposed to interact with each other. Right? It's just like TCP/IP, like core protocol of the internet. And that whole thing was basically, kind of built and imbued with our cultural values of freedom and speech and just like global connectedness, like no barriers between you and me, nobody that owns the line that we are connected to each other, right? There's nobody that can interfere with that. So TCP/IP is one of those protocols, and I think that AI needs these kinds of protocols and solutions. And then those protocols and solutions need to be so universal that people just adopt it, and then there's like this base level of trust in the system and in the world of AI. I think we are not there yet. We're trying to do our best, but it requires the unification and the kind of like getting together of probably the smartest people in the space, both in blockchain and non-blockchain, to really kind
Yeah,
of like figure this thing out together. But I think, like we're still in this phase where we're still in the boom phase, man. It's like everybody wants to make money, everybody wants to do all this crazy stuff with it, and people don't really care about their privacy. But there's going to be a point where everybody says it's like, okay, this is too much. Like once your entire environment is basically just populated just by AI, people are going to realize real quick that a change has to happen. And I think, next 5 years we'll see something like that happen.
Sure. Looking ahead, sort of over the, I suppose next 12 months, next 5 years, how do you sort of envision Swarm evolving over that period, and how do you see it sort of playing in reshaping the way that we approach AI and decentralization?
Yeah. For me, the most important thing is like very early distribution of the ownership of the entire thing. I don't like to be alone on a mission, you know? So we got this license sale coming up where we allocated a large portion of the token supply that people can get over time if they participate and if they actually
Nice.
build swarms. So that one is launching. I hope that we can get a lot of people to join the network through that mechanism, get rewarded really early on, and actually join us in the pursuit of finding more nice use cases and really building this thing out with the community. It's going to be super simple to build your own agents and build your own swarms. What's going to be a little bit harder is to build your reputation within the network because we really care about this kind of like value, right? Like what kind of value are you contributing to the network? And there's this reputation system that we adhere by.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess the next 3 months is going from just our swarm to another, 15, 20 top-notch swarms that all power their own respective applications. And then beyond that, just keep scaling that up.
Exciting. I'm genuinely pumped by this. It's been great just sort of sitting here and having this conversation with you around it. For me, it sounds groundbreaking. And the work that you guys are doing at Swarm Network, and it's exciting to see how decentralized AI swarms and technologies like the Truth Protocol are setting the stage, in my opinion, for a more transparent and trusted future. I think it's definitely what we need in the world, and I'm excited to follow on the journey with you guys. I'd love to get you back on as well at some point, maybe mid towards the end of this year, and just sort of get an update on how things are going, and have another chat, because yes, there's so much more that we can sort of explore and talk about here together as well. Appreciate your time, Yannick. Thank you so
Thanks,
much
man.
for sharing all your insights. For our listeners, to learn more about Swarm Network, visit swarm.network, is it? I believe
Swarm Network.
swarmnetwork.ai.
Yeah.
Explore their innovative projects. As always, don't forget to like, share and subscribe to Web3 Insights for more conversations with innovators shaping the decentralized revolution. Thank you so much again for tuning in.
Thanks,
Thank you
man.
for your support, and appreciate your time, Jan.
Thanks, man. Thanks, guys, for tuning in. And we'd love to talk to you again, man. Let's
Yeah
link up soon.
we'll sort it out.